Hey guys, Nico here from Vantage Planning, and this is the very next episode of Millennial Money Canada. And in this episode, I'm going to share with you guys how to build your credit score. So the first question is, what is your credit score? All it really is this number that you're given that represents how trustworthy you are to lenders when they want to lend you some money, right? And this number is calculated by these things called credit bureaus. And these are companies that take all these information from financial institutions, credit card companies, and they take all this information in, they analyze it, and they give you this number that represents how trustworthy you are, right? But there's 5 factors that they look into to calculate it. But before I go into those, I want to talk about why it's so important to build a good credit score. So when I talk about good credit, it's about being able to have the trustworthiness when you need to borrow money in the future. And this is especially important when you're looking at borrowing money for a large amount. And for most people, the most common one is their mortgage. Some other ones include maybe a car loan or a personal loan, maybe a personal loan for your business. You want to have a good credit score so that when you need to borrow money, you already have a reputation so that they're more likely to give you the money. And it's not something that builds overnight. It usually takes years to build a good credit score. And so understanding the factors that you need to look into ahead of time will put you literally years ahead so that when you do need to get your mortgage or when you do need to get that loan, you already have that credit score built up, right? So what I'm going to be talking about here are the 5 main factors that the credit bureaus, the 2 ones in Canada being one Equifax and the other TransUnion. I'm going to look at the 5 factors that they look at to calculate your credit score. And I'm going to go in order of the most important to the least important. There's certain percentages to them, but these are rounded up numbers. So if I give a percentage on how important the factor is, it's just an approximate. So the very first factor is your payment history. And all this really means is how well are you at paying your bills on time? And this can go from your credit card payments to your phone bills to your student loan payments. As long as you're paying those on time, not missing any payments, you're good. But what's important is that missing a credit card payment of $10 is just as bad as missing a credit card payment of $10,000. So that it's not necessarily as important to how big the payment is as opposed to making sure that you pay the payments on time. And some people don't realize that there's certain bills that you want to make sure that are paid that aren't always necessarily considered or aren't top of mind when looking to build credit. And some of them include if you have some payments that were taken to collection agencies, or some bills that you haven't paid, like for your street parking tickets that you haven't paid. They can take those to the credit bureau and it can negatively impact your credit score. So you want to make sure you're aware of those and make sure that you pay those. Right, so the second most important factor is something called the credit utilization ratio. And all this really means is what percentage of your credit are you using compared to how much you have in total. And just for an example's sake, say for example you have a credit card with a $10,000 credit limit and you use $1,000 of it every month. Your credit utilization ratio is $1,000 over $10,000, which is 10%, as long as you're paying it off regularly. And the rule of thumb is that you want to keep this percentage under 30% to keep you in a good ratio, and you want to avoid being above 70%. Even if you pay your credit card or your line of credit regularly, you want to make sure it's under 70% because it'll have a negative impact on your credit score. So one thing with this is that a lot of times people get these things called credit limit increases. Sometimes it's offered to you by the bank. And the nice thing with this is that when you get offered this, if you take it, it improves your credit utilization ratio, because if you went from $10,000 to $20,000 and you have a $1,000 balance on your credit card, it's at a 5% utilization ratio, which works out better for you. But you want to also check your own spending psychology to see if you can actually keep up that purchasing power of that new credit limit. And what I mean by this is that some people are maxed out and these credit card companies offer you a credit limit increase and they still try to give it to you, and it might be tempting, but then if you know that you're going to be spending the money, you'd be better off not using it in the first place, or not taking the credit limit increase in the first place. So the third factor that they take into consideration is the length of the credit. And this means is how long have you had this form of credit, whether it's credit cards or line of credits or your student loans, how long have you had it in place for them to keep track of your history. And this kind of your track record with your credit to see how long you've been paying off your bills and how long you've been paying off your credit. And so it's important when you've been holding on to a certain credit instrument, like your credit card, for over a decade, that you don't just cancel it right away, right? Some people, they get a new card that they've been only holding for 2 months, but they canceled their card they held for 10 years. What happens is that you cancel out the 10 years of credit you've been building with the old credit card when you cancel it. So you want to be selective when you're canceling credit cards or canceling other forms of credit to make sure that it won't negatively impact your credit score. But of course, you don't want to have 10 credit cards lying around, so you want to be selective with which ones you want to hold to help build your credit and which ones you want to hold to maintain the length of that credit. So the fourth type of, or the fourth factor you want to consider are the different types of credits. You want to have at least 2 different types of credits maintained over a long period of time so that these credit bureaus like Equifax or TransUnion has a better understanding of how you manage different types of credit. The most common ones are your credit card, line of credit, mortgage, personal loans, student loans, your phone bills. And these are the most common ones that they can look at. And you want to make sure you have 2 different types at least so that they have a more comprehensive understanding of your situation. The last one I'm going to be talking about that they look into is inquiries. And what this means is that every time you try and apply for a new credit or try to open up a new financial account, what these companies will do is something called either a soft credit check or a hard credit check. And a soft credit check, all that really means is that they'll look at a brief overview of your credit situation. But a hard credit score is a more comprehensive look at your entire credit situation, your financial situation. And the more hard credit checks that you have in a short amount of time, the more negative of an impact it'll have on your credit score. The reason for this is, say, for example, you try to apply for a credit card at 6 different places within the span of 2 weeks. It becomes kind of questionable of you as a borrower whether you can actually maintain these credits or not. So what the rule of thumb I normally give is applying for 1 or 2 new forms of credit every 6 months or so might have a negative impact in the short term, but in the long run, it won't be that big of a deal. And so these are the 5 most common financial factors that you want to look into when trying to build your credit score. Just to recap, there are 5 factors that you want to consider when building your credit score. And it's not about being perfect with all 5 of these. It's going to take some time, but what's most important is that you start early, at least a year or 2 in advance, to try and build your credit so that when you actually want to apply for that large loan, that you already have the credit score built up to support you and to make it easier for you to get approved. The last thing I want to reiterate is that this is only one of many factors that the lenders will look for when trying to lend you some money, right? They want to see how trustworthy you are from the standpoint of how your employment is, how you'll be in being able to keep up with the payments, how your assets and all your liabilities line up. And so there are many factors to consider, and you want to make sure that you're educated so that you can prepare for all of these in advance. So stick around, I'm going to be sharing more factors to help you get more credit, more loans, and how to get you set up financially for all other areas as well. So stick around, hope you all enjoyed this video, and take care.